Hello and welcome to the tutorial for the honey pants. I really hope you're having a great time today with me, sewing your own honey pants or shorts, and I would say let's start. If you're using a fabric that looks the same on both sides and it's hard to tell the right side from the wrong side, I will show you now how to mark the right side. This step is important, so you make sure to mark your right sides clearly and carefully before you start sewing. Take your two back pieces. You can recognize them by the two notches at the top. Lay them out just like I'm showing you in the video. You've cut a pair, which means you have two mirrored pieces. Now place them like this and mark the right sides of the fabric using pins or tailor's chalk. Do the same with your two front pant pieces. Mark the right sides of the fabric. Then lay out your two pairs of pocket pieces and mark the right side on each of them as well. If you're making the version with a drawstring, take your two drawstring pieces and mark one side as the right side. If you are using a fabric like mine where both sides look exactly the same, it doesn't matter which side you choose as the right side. Now let's start with the first step, sewing the drawstring. If you're making the version without the drawstring, simply skip this part. Place both drawstring pieces right sides together so the right sides are touching. Sew one of the short ends together using a straight stitch and a 1 cm seam allowance. For every stitch, don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and end of every stitch. Now press the seam open. You can use a bias tape maker to make your drawstring more easily. If you don't have one, here's how to make it. Fold the drawstring in half lengthwise, with the right side facing out, and press to create a center crease. If you've pressed the entire drawstring in half lengthwise, unfold it again and press both short ends in by 1 cm. Then press both long edges inwards, stopping a few millimeters before the center crease. The center crease is the line in the middle that was created when you pressed the drawstring lengthwise in half. First, press one long edge toward the center crease, stopping just before the middle. Do the same with the other long edge, pressing it toward the center crease as well. Now fold the drawstring closed along the center crease again and press it. While pressing, don't forget to secure everything in place with pins. edge stitch along all the raw edges. To do this, sew a straight stitch about 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge, sewing the open sides closed where both fabric layers meet. This will close the drawstring on the 3 open sides. It's also a good idea to use the hand wheel for the last stitches on the short side, so you can stop precisely about 2 to 3 millimeters before the fabric edge. Then you can turn the hand wheel so the needle is down in the fabric, and you can lift your presser foot and rotate the fabric 90 degrees. Then lower the presser foot again and continue edge stitching along the long side. While sewing, make sure to keep an even distance from the edge at all times. Also, try to ensure that the top and the bottom fabric layers you're sewing together lie flat and aligned neatly. When you reach the end of the long side, use the hand wheel to sew the last few stitches and leave the needle down in the fabric. Lift the presser foot to turn your fabric, then lower the presser foot again. You can sew the short side again more carefully using the hand wheel for better control. Never forget to backstitch at the beginning and end of each seam. This secures your thread so the seam doesn't come undone. When you've finished sewing, press your new seams to set them into the fabric and give the drawstring a neat finished look. Now we're going to prepare the pockets. To do that, we will finish the edges shown here in the video. If you have an overlock machine, feel free to use it to finish the edges. But if you don't, maybe because you live in a van like I do and only have space for a regular sewing machine, or you simply don't own an overlocker yet, you can also use your regular sewing machine. Just switch from a straight stitch to a zigzag stitch, or use the overlock stitch that your machine maybe has. I'm using a zigzag stitch since every machine comes with that. For this fabric, I set the stitch length to 1.5 and the width to 4, but this really depends on your fabric. It's best to test your settings on 2 scrap pieces first to find what works best for you. When sewing, position your fabric so that the left swing of the zigzag stitch lands in the fabric, and the right swing just barely goes off the edge into the air next to the fabric. Finish the top straight edge and the curved edge of all 4 pocket pieces. Take one of your 2 back pant pieces and lay it down with the right side facing up. You can recognize it by the 2 notches at the top. Take one of your pocket pieces and place it right side up next to your pant piece to check that it's the correct one. Then flip it onto the pants so that the right sides are touching. Find the side notch of your pants. It shows you exactly where the pocket should be pinned in place. Sew the pocket in place with a 1 cm seam allowance. Start just above the top edge of the pocket and continue sewing about 1 centimeter past the bottom of the pocket. Now we are going to finish the entire seam of the pants where you just attached the pocket. Use your serger or your regular sewing machine to do this. Do the same with your other back pant piece. Now I will show you how to do it with your front pants. Lay the pant pieces and pocket pieces right side up. Flip the pockets onto the pants so the right sides are touching. Find the notch and make sure the top edge of the pocket lines up exactly with the notch. Pin the pockets in place and sew them on with a 1 cm seam allowance. Next, fold the pocket flap open and press it flat. Edge stitch the seam allowance to the pocket by sewing a straight stitch about 2 to 3 mm from the seam on the folded open pocket. Make sure the seam allowance is tucked under the pocket and you're securing it with the edge stitch. While sewing, gently pull the fabric slightly apart with both hands to keep it smooth. Once you've attached all 4 pockets to your 4 pant pieces, take one of your back pant pieces and lay it right side up. Then take one of your front pant pieces and lay it right side down on top of the back piece so the right sides are touching. You will know that you have chosen the correct front pant piece if the right sides are touching from the front and the back pant piece, and you can align the side seams with the pockets perfectly. If that's not the case, simply use your other front pant piece. That one will fit correctly. Make sure the side seams and the pockets line up neatly on top of each other. Pin everything securely in place. Now we are going to sew the side seam with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. I will show you exactly how to sew around the pockets. I will mark the sewing path with white chalk so you can follow along. You can do the same on your fabric, at least around the pockets, to make sure you sew the side seam with a 1.5 cm seam allowance all the way around, also at the pockets, because it's a little bit tricky if you're doing it for the first time. When you reach the bottom edge of the pocket, sew along the curve of the pocket up to this point here. Then sew straight until you are again 1.5 centimeters inside the pant leg. From there, continue sewing down the rest of the pant leg seam with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. We will do the same with the other two pant legs. Lay your back pant piece right side up, then place the front pant piece right side down on top, so the right sides are touching. Align the side seams carefully. Pin them in place and sew the side seam with pockets using a 1.5 cm seam allowance. Again, you can mark the sewing path with white chalk if that helps you sew more accurately around the pockets. When you reach the corners while sewing around the pockets, leave the needle down in the fabric and lift the presser foot to rotate the fabric. Lower the presser foot and continue sewing until you need to turn again. Look at the notches to identify your front piece. It has one notch. Now press the entire seam allowance toward the front pant piece. The next step is optional, and you can, if you want to, now secure the seam allowance to the front pant piece with a top stitch. This gives a very neat finish. To do this, lay your pant piece right side up. This is the front piece and this is the back piece. Since you press the seam allowance toward the front piece, you will top stitch here on the front pants to hold it in place. To do this, sew a top stitch about 2 to 3 millimeters from the seam, just like I'm showing here. Be careful not to sew the pocket closed here. When you reach the pocket opening, stop your top stitch. End the stitching at the top and leave the pocket opening open. To mark the pocket opening so you don't forget to leave it open, you can also insert pins like I've done here. Then start sewing again, just after the pocket opening, making sure the seam allowance is tucked under the front pants and that you securely stitch it in place. Here too, it helps to gently pull the fabric apart with both hands while sewing, so you can top stitch really close to the seam. Now press over the new seam once. Press over the pocket opening, then fold the pocket open and press inside of the pocket as well. Once you've done this with both pant pieces, lay one piece right side up and place the other piece on top, right side down as shown here, so the right sides are touching. Make sure that the two back pieces, the ones with the two notches, and the two front pieces with one notch are aligned and lying on top of each other. Now we're going to sew the crotch seam, those curved seams. Lay the two pant pieces carefully on top of each other and pin the crotch seam together securely. Sew a straight stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Do the same for the other crotch seam. Finish the seam now using your serger or a zigzag stitch. Press the seam allowance toward the left on both sides. So if your pants are in front of you with a top part where the pockets are and everything, the top part facing up, and the bottom part with the legs facing down, then press the seams toward your left side. Then turn the pants so the right side is facing out now. The next step is optional. Here you can see the side seam with the pockets. And here is the crotch seam. When you look at the right, so the good side of your pants, the seam allowance is pressed toward the right pant piece. When I say right here, I don't mean the fabric's right good side, but the right hand side as you're facing the pants. So I mean the direction relative to your right hand. This means you will top stitch on the right side of the crotch seam, where your right hand is, securing the seam allowance to the right side of your pants. The same applies to the other crotch seam. You will top stitch on the right side of the pants there as well. When top stitching, always make sure the seam allowance is fully tucked under the right side of the fabric and that your stitch securely holds it in place. Press over the new seam to set the stitches into the fabric. Now we're going to sew the inseam, which runs along here. Start by aligning the two crotch seams exactly and pinning them together. Then continue pinning carefully down the length of the pant leg, making sure the fabric layers are properly aligned. Now sew the inseam together with a 1 cm seam allowance. When you reach the crotch seam, make sure the crotch seams line up perfectly. If you didn't do the optional step of top stitching the crotch seam allowance down, make sure the seam allowances are positioned correctly now. When looking from above while sewing, the upper seam allowance should be pressed to the left and the lower one on the underside should be pressed to the right. This opposite pressing prevents 6 layers of fabric from stacking at the seam and instead creates only 4 layers, making the seam lie flatter and more comfortable. Finish the seam using your preferred method. Press the seam allowance toward the back of the pants. Don't forget you can identify the back by the 2 notches at the top of the waistband. Let's work on the waistband. The waistband is built into the pants and we will create it by pressing a tunnel for the elastic. To start, fold and press the waistband down by 1 cm. Now it's very important to pay attention to where the front pants piece is, the one with a single notch. The pockets need to be folded toward the front pants. Now fold your waistband down by another 4.5 cm and press. Pin the bottom edge of the waistband in place, making sure the pockets are also pinned down. Work your way around the entire waistband, folding it down by 4.5 cm and pressing as you go. Make sure the pockets are pinned down into the front pants. The next step is optional. If you have decided to make your pants with a drawstring, we will now create the openings where the drawstring will come out. If you're making your pants without the drawstring, simply skip the buttonhole step and continue with the next part. Find your front pants, the one where you pinned down the pockets, and turn it so the right side is facing up. Measure 2 cm down from the top edge and mark this height. Then draw the outline for your buttonhole, which will be the opening for the drawstring. I originally drew my buttonholes horizontally in relation to the waistband, but I actually recommend placing them vertically. So this is the direction I would recommend you to mark and also sew your buttonholes. In the following videos I will do it horizontally, which is not as good as the other way I just showed you. Refer to your sewing machine manual for detailed instruction on sewing buttonholes, because every sewing machine is completely different with this, and I cannot really show you how your sewing machine is doing the buttonholes. If you're using a very lightweight fabric, consider adding a small piece of interfacing behind the buttonhole area to reinforce it and prevent fraying. Sew the buttonholes vertically and carefully open them using a seam ripper. Each buttonhole should be about 1 cm wide to fit the drawstring. When opening your buttonholes, you can place a pin at the end of the buttonhole as a stopper for the seam ripper. This helps to ensure that you only cut the hole open that you want and you don't accidentally go too far. Now pin everything back in place, and once again make sure the pockets are positioned on the front pant piece. Mark a 5 cm opening. It's important to leave this gap so you can insert your elastic band later. Edge stitch close to the folded edge, leaving the marked opening unstitched. While you're edge stitching around the waistband, make sure your pockets are tucked under the waistband and that you sew them in place as well. Now you can take your 4 cm wide elastic band and wrap it around your body where the pants will sit later. The pants are designed to sit high-waisted, a few centimeters below your natural waist. Measure the length you need and add 2 cm seam allowance. Then cut your elastic band to that length. Attach a safety pin to both ends of your elastic band. Pin one end to the opening of your waistband. Then thread the other end through the tunnel you've created. Use your thumb and forefinger to hold the safety pin inside the waistband steady while gently pulling the rest of the waistband fabric smooth. Push the safety pin forward bit by bit smoothing the fabric as you go until the elastic band is fully threaded through the tunnel. Make sure the elastic stays flat and doesn't twist inside the tunnel. Eventually you will come back to the opening and you can pull the elastic band out. Double check that it's not twisted inside the tunnel. Then overlap the ends of the elastic by 1 centimeter on both sides and pin them securely together. Once you've pinned the elastic ends together, slide the elastic back into the tunnel. Now be sure to try on your pants to check if the elastic length fits perfectly. If it's too loose, you can simply trim it a bit and make it tighter. If it's too tight and it's uncomfortable, make a new longer elastic band instead, because it's important that your honey pants are just as comfortable as they are beautiful. If the length of your elastic band is perfect, let's sew it together. Pull the elastic out as shown here. Overlap the ends by 1 centimeter and sew them together several times back and forth with a zigzag stitch to secure it. Slide your elastic band back into the tunnel and sew the opening closed. To do this, edge stitch about 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge. Now we want to secure the elastic band so it doesn't shift around. If you're planning to do the optional step of sewing 2 parallel lines above and below the buttonholes, you can skip this step. That stitching will secure the elastic as well. To secure the elastic here, sew what's called a stitch in the ditch, meaning you sew directly into the existing seam line. This way the stitching is nearly invisible while anchoring the elastic in place. Do this only on the front side of the waistband. If you also sew the back, you won't be able to pull the drawstring through later. The next step is optional, but I personally love to do it. I think it gives the waistband a nicer look. To do this, sew 1 line of stitching across the entire waistband above the buttonholes and a second line below them. While sewing, stretch the elastic so it's fully extended beneath the fabric. Start from the back of the pants and sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam and keep stretching the elastic as you're sewing to ensure it lays evenly once relaxed. For the lower line of stitching, sew 1 centimeter up from the bottom edge of the waistband. This is what it looks like with both horizontal lines of stitching, and I really love this. If you have a drawstring, attach a safety pin to one end and thread it through the waistband tunnel. And now we have made it to the very last step, hemming the pants. To begin, we turn the pants inside out. By the way, in the video I am wearing the honey shorts without a drawstring and with the 2 horizontal top stitches across the waistband. So press the bottom edge of your pants up by 1 centimeter. Make sure the seam allowances are lying flat and in the right direction. Then press it up again by 3 centimeters. Pin your hem in place, and now it's very important that you try on your pants to check the length. Look closely to see if the length feels right for you. If they are too long, you can simply press up more. For example, you can press up 1 centimeter for the first row, and then you can press up 6 centimeters instead of 3. You can pin and check if that works better. If you don't want to have a larger hem, but you want the smaller hem, you can measure how much too long your pants are, trim off the excess, and then fold up 1 and then 3 centimeters as originally planned. It's important that if you decide to trim your pants, that you make sure to add back the 4 centimeters you will need for hemming, so you don't cut it too short. Then edge stitch the hem in place, sewing about 2 to 3 millimeters from the folded edge. Press the hem flat and repeat the same steps for the other pant leg. I am so happy you chose the honey pants, and I hope you love your new garment. I will see you soon. Best, Funny.